This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Today, we have gathered here an hour ago to talk about Chapter 7, A Goatpen. And this is, almost these two chapters are the reintroduction of Morgase as a serving girl.
This is when she becomes Ghealdan, and we start trying to learn her as Ghealdan, but she thinks of herself as Morgase, so we still think of her as Morgase. But yeah, this brings together two very disparate arcs that have not been together, right? I mean, this is Perrin picking up followers. The followers in this case happen to be an entire other storyline with Morgase at the center, and also brings Balwer to him, which is an incredibly important thing that happens.
And it also creates the two layers conversation that we love so much in Wheel of Time, right? The one layer, which is Perrin talking to the Magdan folks, and then there's the Magdan folks talking to themselves. We need a name for that group. The Andorran refugees, I think?
Yeah, the queenly refugees. I don't know. Lion in exile? I
We're back with Perrin. This is really the beginning of Perrin's second arc, right? His first arc is sort of the whole Two Rivers stuff. And we see him a little bit with Rand and Dumai's Wells. But that's more of Rand's arc. And now we are here with Perrin, and he gets to start out in Ghealdan and do everything with Ghealdan.
This is the beginning of him starting to gather followers, right? This is the beginning of this massive disparate quilt that he builds. This is one of the very first squares of that quilt.
The Ghealdan sky was cloudless, the forested hills hammered by a fierce morning sun. Even short of midday, the land sweltered. Pines and leatherleaf were yellowing in the drought, and others Perrin suspected were evergreens. Not a whisper of air stirred. Sweat dripped down his face, ran into his short beard. His curly hair was matted on his head. He thought he heard thunder somewhere to the west, but he had almost stopped believing it would ever rain again. You hammered the iron that lay on your anvil instead of daydreaming about working silver. From the vantage of his sparsely treed ridge, he studied the walled town of Bethel through the brass-bounded looking-glass. Even his eyes could use help over this distance. It was a good-sized town of slate-roof buildings with half a dozen tall stone structures that might have been miners' nobles' palaces or the homes of well-to-do merchants. He could not make out the scarlet banner hanging limply atop the tallest tower of the largest palace, the only flag in sight, but he knew who it belonged to. Alejandra Martia Kigreen, Queen of Ghealdan, far from her capital in Johanna. Thank you.
Alejandra Maritha Kigarin in Johanna.
So why don't you do these readings?
Because I don't aggressively take them out of your hands.
So yeah, this is basically, this is one of the first queens he collects, right? Like, she ends up the first queen. Well,
Faile's not a queen.
Technically, he gets Magdan first.
Well, she's not a queen anymore. And she doesn't like him until long after Alejandra throws her lot in.
That's fair.
At this point, she's like, I can sabotage him from the inside with his tea. Like, that's pretty much where she ends this section at. In fairness, he does technically impress a queen before Alejandra.
And Faile will be a queen.
Faile will be a queen. She is third in line. That's pretty damn close. And she ends up queen within the next, 2 months or however much longer this series takes. Faile and Alejandra's relationship are, it's an important relationship. Really, Faile, Alejandra, and Magdan, they go through a lot together.
Mm-hmm.
And they learn a lot from each other. And there's a whole, queen culture thing that kind of happens with them.
There is. It's like the queens get together and figure out how to be queens because they don't really know how to do it yet.
Well, because Magdan knows what she's doing, but she's not given that acknowledgement because she won't acknowledge it. Alejandra has only ever ruled a very weak country, but she's done it better than all her predecessors. And then Faile is not actually queen. She just might be queen someday, but it's not exactly fated at this point from where she's sitting. So it's like Magdan ends up teaching them a whole bunch about how to be an actual queen, but I don't know. It's just, it's interesting that they have such an intense experience while not being able to exert queenliness over any of each other. I mean, Faile leads mostly, but still, they're all servants. They're all slaves at that point.
It's almost like there's a certain value in service before you gain power. Or another way to say it is everybody should work a service industry job before they try and order at a restaurant. Right? Like, serve people, deal with the public before you have to rule the public. You know, it seems like maybe there's something to be said for that sort of raising up of kings and queens in that way. Yeah.
Which arguably the White Tower did to Maegden, and look how well that worked out to Morgase.
I would claim that she was a very successful queen until a Forsaken came along and took her over, which is not necessarily anything you can prepare for.
No, sure. I'm just saying she learned a lot from being enslaved in Malden, and that implies she didn't learn those lessons when she was going around in the literal war monastery.
Yeah. I mean, the Aes Sedai fail on many, many levels, including teaching, and this is just another example. So let's talk about a storm that swept over this part of Ghealdan. What's going on in Ghealdan? We've got the White Cloaks, which are at this point still implementing Pedron Niles' chaos doctrine.
Yes, except that they have now just been beheaded by the Seanchan just a couple of days ago. That happened. Also, just a couple of days ago, the explosion of power in the sky happened. Mm-hmm. Not that the White Cloaks would have noticed that or cared.
No, but they might have noticed the reactions that people were having to that explosion of power.
Possibly.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of the ways that we can tell. They talk about two threads passing overhead in this situation. One in the male, one of the female source. Mm-hmm. So we know both of them went out. We saw, and then that's one of the cool things about Perrin is he's actually one of the few groups that has both male and female channelers working
together. Of course
together.
He does. Of course it's Perrin who can bring together men and women even in these times. Channelers, male and female channelers even in these times.
And it looks like it has been exactly 7 days, which we find out in the Path of Daggers chapter 10. So we don't find that out yet, but it's been, at this point...
it's been 10 days.
It's been 10 days. No, it's been 7 days.
7 days. More than half a week ago. That's what we get in this chapter. So yeah, 7 days. And then just a few days ago, they get rumors about the Seanchan hitting Amador. We don't know how many days the rumor took to get to him. I'm not sure where the Seanchan attack was, but the Seanchan attack has to have been before the bowl.
Quite a bit before, because Morgase and Linny were there during it.
Right.
And then they took them, and then they escaped during it, right? That was the whole chaos of the takeover. So however long they've been traveling. And it's been a while that they've been traveling,
right? Weeks, I think.
Yeah, they were surprised.
Yeah.
That the word hadn't reached before them. But I think part of the reason the word hadn't reached Perrin yet is because he gatewayed in, right? So he just avoided all the news. He actually gatewayed around it. That's why they're like, well, how did you avoid it? And it's like, well, because I took a gateway.
Because I fast traveled. Duh.
That's always the danger of fast traveling, right? Like you miss the details sometimes. I remember my first experience with that was playing Myst. And you could turn on the little zip icon, and you could zip between locations. And there was one place where you had to go down a corridor. And halfway down the corridor, there was a door to the side.
So if you zipped, you would miss it.
So if you zipped, you missed it. And I missed it every single time. And I just got so stuck on that level until I turned off fast travel. So be wary of fast travel. You'll miss details.
And I mean, also, there's literally a storm coming. Because of the Bull of the Winds getting used. Like, he hears thunder and he feels the wind and he's like, nah. And Faile thinks about it later, like, nah, I must be imagining it. You're not imagining it. The weather's starting to turn because 7 days ago, the Bull of the Winds got used and they are right under one of the big, big pylons of power that went shooting out. They are right under it. So they got they're going to be where the impact is felt first, right?
Yeah, because don't they say that the one that passed over them reminded them of wind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. It's like, it makes me think of wind. I don't know why. It's like, because it's the weather!
Okay, right.
Listening to the wind! It's a thing!
We have a cast of characters here, which are sort of the core of Perrin's army group, right? Berelain and her Aes Sedai advisor, who later ends up going to
Massima. Yeah,
Massima,
and Nora likes trying to mess with him.
Yeah.
And it's weird. That whole thing's weird.
and it's a whole. I think what we came down to is Nora has a crush on Berelain,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's like causing her to do some weird things.
Yeah, and that's why she like burns herself out to bring Ghealdan back to her,
Exactly.
because she feels guilty over this, and there's a whole unrequited crush headcanon that I'm sticking to.
I'm right there with you.
There's so much more tragic.
And then the commander of her guards, Lord Ghealdan, who I believe
Ghealdan.
Ghealdan. We talked about him sort of when we introduced him. I was like, oh, he's a nobody, and you're like, no, he's actually around for quite a bit. He commands the guards, and he's
important.
He's important. He just doesn't have a lot of lines or have a lot of initiative on his own.
No, he exists as a necessary balance to like explain how strategy works. He's one of the people being like, but what about this problem? And like teachable moment kind of character. He's fine. He's great. He's useful. He's like a bannerman. From what I understand from this world of military strategy, he's the bannerman.
He's Berelain's Lord Brent.
Yeah. He's really good for morale. He draws men. He takes care of them. He presents sound strategy. Mm-hmm. He's a good dude.
Then we have the Aes Sedai. Oh, there's 2 Aes Sedai. There's 2 wise ones that we hear about.
Yeah, it's just a complete recap of here's everyone. Perrin has like 30 people who he intimately relies on, and here's all of them.
And here's all of them arguing for why they should be the one to go talk to Alejandra and make the case. So don't really feel like we need to go through all of those arguments.
No, it's a really good exposition to remind us where we are, who we're with. But Rand sent Perrin to get Alejandra to pledge support publicly. Perrin has a lot of backseat drivers. That's pretty much what's happening.
Right. We get the quote about the lace of the One Power streaking high across the sky, both male and female.
Which itself causes a huge stir amongst all the female channelers. They're like, what? The men feel it too?
Exactly.
Oh, no.
No, that's a bad thing. Because basically the idea of it's men and women at that scale has to be Forsaken. There's the only possible person who could use power at that scale. And it's just, we're beyond that now. Everybody, we are at the point where there's enough male and female channelers who are powerful enough with enough Angreal and circles. Yeah.
Well, in fairness to them, the Bowl did not have male channelers working with it. The concept of men and women working together, they assumed that there had to be men involved. And that is a very reasonable assumption because we haven't seen a lot of Angreal drawing the male half without control. So thinking that it's the Forsaken does make a lot of sense, but it's also like, yeah, we're beyond that now. Like, the super OP artifacts are here.
You literally have guys from the Black Tower next to you, right? Like, you've got Rand. There are other sources of male channeling in this world.
That's true.
It seems very, very much like jumping to conclusions.
Yeah. And in counter fairness, like, it was a Terangreal. Only the Forsaken know how to use those, right?
All the known Terangreal can't do that.
Right. It has to be something that they specific. It's so I will never not give them shit for not sending out a memo that they were going to be doing a huge magical boom somehow, at least to a couple of people, so that way the news could percolate out, even if it's after the terror, even if people running around thinking that the Forsaken are coming, if they could get an update. Well,
it wouldn't be that hard, right? Because they have access to Teller and Riyadh, right? So tell the wise ones can spread it to the other wise ones, and then Perrin would know, because the wise ones could say, no, don't worry about that. That's
our guys. We're good.
That's our guys. We're good. The wise ones have that sort of network. It's via Teleron Riyadh, and our Supergirls have access to it. Leave a note.
Yeah, it would have been so easy and reduced so much stress and bad planning. And
I will refer back to the meme of Wheel of Time if our characters communicated.
But it's so obvious. Ugh. Yeah, no, they really needed to do that.
So I had a big question about the paragraph where he glanced to the sky and saw nothing, of course, except a pair of pigeons. Abruptly, a hawk plummeted into his sight, and one of the pigeons was gone in a spray of feathers. The other winged on frantically toward Bethal. What?
I just rolled right past that.
Is that a Tuon Shan-chan prophecy? Not a prophecy, but omen. Omen. Is that an omen? Is the hawk
It would be an
Berelain?
omen to her. That
Yeah.
would absolutely be an omen to Tuon.
And since we know all the omens just mean death.
It's kind of like going to WebMD. What's wrong with me? Cancer.
Oh, I saw an omen. What does it mean? Death will come to somebody you love.
Your empire is in danger.
Anything besides that? No, they all mean that.
But, hawk is Berelain. That is man.
Right.
And pigeons are, they could be carrying messages for all we know. Or they could just be random birds.
Maybe the one pigeon is Ghealdan and the other one's Perrin. It misses one and she gets the other. No, I don't have... I looked it up and I'm not finding anything obvious about it. It's just an odd little paragraph that doesn't...
Well, everything's about choices here. And it's like his hand is going to be forced, maybe. Is like you can't choose, so some outside force is going to choose for you.
The other possibility is that it just represents like the queens of Ghealdan getting like knocked down and one of them like winged for the safety of Bethal.
Yeah.
And the hawk could represent just the predators.
Yeah. Or no, I actually kind of like that. That like that's the situation that he's walking into as someone who has barely avoided being picked off.
Right.
Yeah, I could see that. No, I totally skated right by that as just a random detail, but like I know better. It's Robert Jordan we're talking about. Of course there's a fucking meaning. Maybe we'll never know what it is, but we absolutely should not assume that is just a random detail. Sometimes the curtains are just blue, but not this time, I don't think.
And so often the hawk represents something important to Perrin.
Yeah, because of the way Berelain fits into everything.
Right.
And then Faile's a falcon, which is, they're all raptors. And yeah. No, you're right. That's so obviously significant. And I'm just like, whatever. It's not Slayer. I don't care. It's fine.
But yeah, I can't make the pigeons Faile and Berelain and Perrin the hawk. Like that doesn't make any sense.
No.
Yeah.
No, the hawk is an antagonist, whether it's Berelain or the Shan-chan or the forces of chaos. I don't know.
Oh, it's implying that Luke Walker saying it implies he has to take Berelain to meet the queen, or else the hawk has to meet the pigeon, or else that something bad will happen.
Then
I don't know.
He fucked that up, didn't he?
Right? Yeah. Anyhow, reading more into that than a 5th grade English teacher. Let's move forward.
It's what you come for. It's what you come to watch spoilers for. So, Navarin, have you made a decision, you indecisive ox? Because Faile and Berelain, we're just beating this fucking plot into our brains so hard.
Yeah,
Faile and Berelain. Competitive.
And so he finally says, a small party will get through those gates easier than a large. That means just you and Honora, Berelain, and maybe Lord Ghealdan. Mm-hmm. So it's basically Berelain and her 2 advisors, her Aes Sedai and her general.
Yep. Yeah. He decides to send in his least favorite queen.
Yeah. And Faile is fine with it. She's not happy about it, but she lost. She's fine. Until Perrin says, oh, I'm sorry. And even I got a little pissed at Perrin for this one. Like, even I'm like, come on. Be a fucking
Why are you infantilizing her?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Stand up for yourself here, man.
Like own your damn decision.
Right. Own it.
Don't be a fucking doormat. She doesn't even want you to be a doormat. Don't do it. It's bad for you. It's bad for her. It's bad for your relationship. It's bad for your leadership. Stop it.
And then he spends a page wondering why she's angry at him for doing a dumbass thing. So.
Yeah. No need to explain why that's a dumbass thing.
No, I think we all.
Oh my God. Like, I'm pretty sure that the first time I read this book, I was like, what are you doing? And I was like 15, 13. I don't know. I was young. Far too young to be this stupid.
That is one of the things I think Jordan is often trying to make his examples that obvious and maybe doesn't do a great, or is like being a little more subtle and fails sometimes with the Perrin and Faile. Like he's trying to make Perrin look like a dumbass, but because it's from Perrin's POV, it's all a little muddled.
I swear, Matt and Rand really do know more about women than Perrin does. I swear.
Desmond said, why couldn't Perrin and Gaul just hooked up? How much?
Yeah, I've heard that ship called Stone Wolf. which always makes me laugh.
That is really funny.
For those of you that remember, just roll with it.
Oh, yeah. That was an inspired choice of a name for a character then.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What's that Freudian slip telling you?
You know, I'd actually heard that reference before, and I was like, wait, Stone Wolf. I never made that connection before because I didn't realize. Yep.
It's a very popular ship.
I mean, I knew that, but I didn't know it had I'd
yeah.
heard, I didn't realize it had a name. Anyway, okay. So apparently I named my my D&D character after a gay chip in the Wheel of Time.
The stars were aligned.
The stars were aligned. See, if I'd known that, I would have played that character very differently. Yeah. Would have been much more interesting. I tell you what, I would love to go back knowing now what I do now and replay that character. And like, just with the technology we have, where we can actually hear each other and see each other a little bit better, and what I know about D&D and all that kind of stuff. But you can't roll back the clock. That's going to be... No.
But you can always start a new campaign.
With what time? I have so much time. I love having all this extra time to do something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. To skip back a little bit, the other thing that's happening while the Faile Berelain thing is going on is we're getting our setting with respect to the prophet. So the two warders come up and kind of give us this report on what their scouting mission has given us, which is that it's worse than back north, and like people are being burned, people are being killed, people are being robbed and tortured, and it's all the prophet, and none of the lords are doing anything about it, and it's just anarchy and chaos.
One thing I noticed that we have a lot in this chapter is Aram's slow descent into insanity. He's not quite a traitor yet. Like, he still very much worships Faile and Perrin. Despite his green striped coat, little tinker remained in him.
Yeah, he's becoming open to outside influence. His faith in Perrin is corroding a little.
Well, and he has no real faith in anything except perhaps Perrin and Faile, but they're people, and you can't have faith in people.
Exactly. He has
They're
faith in
fallible.
people and violence. Like,
right.
Neither of those things is going to hold up long term. And it opens him up to a charismatic cult leader. This is someone who needs a cult. This is a cult follower without a cult. And he's making a cult out of worshiping some very competent leaders who are like, dude, chill.
Right. I do find it to be one of Perrin's failures. You know, it's letting Aram go.
Yeah, I say competent leader, and then I agree completely that Aram is Perrin's biggest mistake, biggest failing.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like, he gave him a good example, and I feel like Aram almost failed himself. Like, there were so many good people around him he could have turned to for help, and instead he turned to the prophet.
I mean,
he had Tam, he had Abel, he had Perrin, he had all the Two Rivers folks, he had Faile, Faile he could have turned to. He had, although they were nobles. It's just...
He had those people, but they also were letting him make his own decision. They were like, you're an outsider. We don't really know what you're going through. Like, you'll come to us if you have a problem. I feel like Tam especially should have been more like Land to Rand and very much taken him in and taken him under his wing and been like, we are your family now. Like, I'm surprised that relationship didn't develop, given that Aram devotes himself to the sword and Tam is the sword teacher. So I wonder, like, why did the Two Rivers men have such a hands-off attitude? And I don't think Perrin was a good example. Perrin is sitting around indecisive to the point of growing moss. I don't think that was good for Aram to idolize.
On some level, this is an argument I'd love to have, because I think Perrin is doing exactly what he should do almost the entire time. It's just his own thoughts and his own craziness that drive him nuts. The lack of self-care needs to be remedied, but his drive to accomplish a goal unites a people in a way, his clarity of vision, and then people come to him and they say, what do I do? And he knows exactly what the answer is. And good God, that value in a leader, Plus, he's always working with his hands. He's always accomplishing things. He's always kind to people. He's, I think, in the same way that Matt is like, oh, I'm gonna go fuck off, and then pulls kids out of a burning building. Perrin is thinking, I'm a terrible leader, and does exactly what he needs to do to lead people to victory.
You're right. We see him being indecisive because we're in his head. This is a particularly indecisive scene of him. That's half the chapters, people telling him to make a choice. But yeah, you're right. His actions are generally quite decisive. It's just his POV that's a mess.
And think about this. This was a lot of argument from a lot of other people, but Perrin never said, oh, maybe not. Maybe you, I don't know. No, he said, after everyone argued, he turned around and said, you three, go. And then he was like, I'm sorry, Faile. But like that was the dumb thing, right? But like he was sorry that he made the decision and it pissed her off, not sorry that he made the decision. So it's one of those things where I try to really separate what they think about themselves versus what they're doing. And that's something I'm really interested to dig more into as Perrin. Like in this situation, we had all these arguments and it feels like he's being very indecisive, but really if you look at what he says and what he does, he is nothing but decisive.
Yeah.
It's everybody else around him who's just making up all these various arguments for things.
Yeah.
And in his head, he thinks through all the ramifications. So yes, that feels indecisive because he doesn't immediately pick one and go with it, right? Like he's not quarterbacking this thing. He's not calling audibles and saying, yeah, we're going with you, but what he does is he thinks through all the ramifications of picking each individual person and then says one thing. And that is the definition of a slow thinker who's decisive, which is what he is.
Yeah. I will concede that. I still think he's a terrible role model for Aram, and it's weird that nobody took him under his wing and they just let him flail off into his own misery.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I will concede that Perrin is doing a better job with respect to what Aram sees than I was giving him credit for.
And where I will say Perrin falls down is in his... It's funny, but his empathy. Despite being an empath, he's, it's like the dreamer who's terrible at interpreting the dreams. He's the empath who's terrible at interpreting emotions, right? Like, he is very good at understanding what other people's emotions are, but he doesn't know why they have them very well. And so he doesn't really get Aram.
Yeah.
And doesn't know how to help him.
Yeah, and somehow nobody older and wiser sees how much Aram is struggling. They somehow think like, well, he'll just get through it, stiff upper lip, and he'll pull out of it, and he never pulls out of it.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Aram feels like very incomplete. Like we see him just with Perrin and Faile. We never see him have any other relationship, any other interaction, any other conversation, right? It's hard to put him into the world. Aram, before he becomes Perrin's lapdog, is this like flirts with Egwene, has issues with his parents, wants to run away, has arguments and opinions, and then afterwards he's just this like, whatever you say, Perrin, until he's whatever you say, Msima.
Yeah, Lord Prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
when you don't have much of an identity, and then what identity you have gets taken away, you're gonna fill up with some very toxic stuff unless you are firmly steered in the right direction.
And I mean, we can talk about the trauma of being thrown out of you. I mean, if we want to make an equivalence, the number of people who come out as gay and are thrown out of their parents' house and have no parental approval.
Yeah, he came out as a violence wielder and got completely disowned.
Exactly. Yep, he was told, no, we don't do that in our house.
And like
Get
in
out.
the immediate aftermath of the trauma of watching his mother die by violence. Like, it's not like like he just decided one day or had been working up to it in his own mind. Like, he's coming out of a family-shattering violent trauma and then gets completely turned out from his people. Like, it's a triple whammy. Even though it's only 2 events, it's a triple whammy. And it's sad that somehow these empathetic, caring, wonderful parents for our Emmons Field folk don't, like, notice the man-child that's falling apart and, like, collect him. But I wonder if it's because Perrin is turning away from Aram, being like, I don't know what to do. And so subtly, his leadership is turning all of the Two Rivers to be like, we don't know what to do with you. And if Perrin had been more concerned, maybe the rest of the Two Rivers would have, because he leads. People go where he leads. And that's what he needs to come to terms with and hasn't yet in this chapter.
And I have to wonder if maybe there's some subtle, nobody really likes the Tinkers. They like to steal things. No, everyone is just, people don't see Tinkers. It's like stepping over a beggar on a sidewalk. And I'm guessing a lot of people treat Aram in the same way, whether they want to or not. There's a certain amount of, I just don't see him.
Yeah, basically racism.
Yeah. No, I mean, not basically, entirely racism.
Yeah, that. Yeah, the implicit bias, because nobody is fucking thinking about that. Nobody's, like, dealing with that. People are just being good people, and oops, looks like I did a racism. Damn.
Just a thought. Yeah.
Damn.
Just thinking about Aram and what drove him to be the douchebag that he ended up becoming.
Yeah, that's... Man, Aram's such a tragic fucking arc.
All right, let's get back to this book.
Also, Aram, dead Tinker, trailer, what? Excuse me, questions. Okay, Back to trailer, back to book.
Could just be unconscious, doesn't have to be dead.
True, I think he's unconscious. They cast him too soon to have him be dead in the fucking trailer. It's bullshit. Anyhow, we're doing the chapter. We're not doing the trailer.
So the next thing I have is Aram spotting Magdan's group being attacked. I don't know if you have anything before there.
Before that, I have Faile displaying very poor relationship skills by saying she doesn't want to talk about it when Perrin tries to talk about the problems in their marriage. Just would like to ceremonially shake my fist at her for shutting that down because that's very toxic. Moving on. Yes, Perrin, Aram finding Magdan.
Yeah, Perrin. Right.
So yeah, we get a view of their party from Perrin's eyes. We get this external POV.
A dozen or more rough-clad fellows carrying spears and pitchforks were trying to force their way over chest-high stone wall of a goat pen, while a handful of men within tried to keep them out. Several horses ran loose inside, frightened at the noise and dodging about, and there were 3 women mounted. They were not simply waiting to see how it all turned out, though. One of the women appeared to be hurling rocks, and even as he looked, another dashed close to the wall to lash out with a long cudgel, while the third reared her horse, and a tall fellow toppled back off the wall to get clear of the flashing hooves. So I'm curious which one you think is which.
Well, the bludgeon is Linny. We get a line later that she still has her bludgeon. I think...
Well, I have to assume the cudgel, cudgel Linny, absolutely.
Yeah, and I assume that it is Morgase rearing the horse, because she would... Well, no, actually, because Brienne would have the same amount of noble horse training. But I just assume that the one rearing the horse is Morgase.
I can't picture Morgase hurling rocks.
And I can totally picture Brienne hurling rocks.
And I can totally picture Brienne hurling rocks. So, yeah.
And then, Seonid's like, it's just casual war crimes. Don't worry about it. Like, it'll be politically inexpedient to mess with that. And Perrin's like, the fuck I'm going to ignore war crimes, which is why we love Perrin.
And it does come back to bite him, right? The fact that he doesn't ignore these war crimes does put the profits back up.
It does. Seonid is correct about the political ramifications. Yeah, absolutely. She's wrong to advise him to ignore them because, I'm an idealist, but...
Yes, I definitely am pro Perrin stopping the murder of innocents, right? But it's also maybe don't let any of these people go.
Yeah, just,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like, they're trying to kill innocents. They don't hang them. Like, don't threaten to hang them. Hang them.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense politically and morally to do that because we have, like, sadistic trophy takers, Just saying. These guys are not good at all.
So somebody channels a large spinning wheel of fire over the
I
the group.
love this. It's so like Book of Revelations.
Yeah.
It's so great.
It's got to be the wise ones, right? The Aes Sedai would never do that. That's too much like using the one power as a weapon.
Yeah, it's Idara, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Idara. And that is a wise one. And she's like, perhaps. And he's like, good enough. We're going in. Like, Perrin, you're wonderful.
And he's so happy that they scared him rather so he doesn't have to actually kill anybody.
Right, that's his idea. Yeah. But it's politically very inexpedient to do that. And it's, yeah. His whole approach to this is very interesting because he's like, oh, well, I knew that this was happening before and I should have done something. But now that I've seen it, I'm going to do something about it. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to go with that. It's just interesting.
And so this whole thing was kicked off. This happened when Megden, Morgase, was fleeing from Talonvor. And we get a little bit more about this in the next chapter, but she was trying to run away, and this group, and he went chasing after her, and this group of men was like, oh, we now get to kill him for that. Is that basically the summation of how the events go?
I think so. I mean, I don't really quite know. Like, I think Morgase was running away from everybody. I think she wasn't just running away from Talonvor. I think she was running away from the entire party, trying to just escape everything. And they were all following Talonvor most successfully. And I think that they were being attacked because they were running and they looked vulnerable, and there's men to kill, women to rape, and gold to take, probably, maybe.
Right.
And at least horses to eat, I guess. I don't really think that they had a lot of like, oh yes, we're going to punish you in the name of the prophet. I think they were just going to kill and pillage the whole party because they were distracted. But I always got the impression that Morgase was running away from literally everybody.
Just her responsibility?
Yeah, she gave up being Morgase. She's renounced the throne, and she wants to start a new life, and she doesn't know any way to do that other than to run away. I think that's where she's at.
It's been a gap since we last saw them, because we last saw them in the palace
In Amador.
in Amador. So when he talks about how a whole bunch of things have happened, and long story short, we found ourselves here, we never really get to fill in those gaps.
No. It's just some weeks of camping and introspection and her breaking the news to them about her new identity. But I don't think a lot happens other than just distance, you know? But then, I mean, she gives up to Linny quite easily when Linny's like, you sit your ass down and don't go anywhere. She gives up quite easily. So maybe she was running away with Linny and Brienne, or just Linny. Maybe it was really about getting away from Talonvor more than anybody else. I don't know. That's always just been my headcanon.
Mm-hmm. I imagine it's always been just a will they, won't they between the two of them. And she, like, almost gave in and then decided and, like, ran away from it with Talonvor. Like, they were in that one of those moments, and she was like, no, I'm leaving. And, like, everyone's like, wait, where are you going? You know?
It's in the next chapter. Yeah, there's an explanation. We'll talk about it when we get there. But yeah, Perrin basically chases her down after she's been chased down and is like, I promise I'm not going to hurt you. And it's surprising she doesn't stick a knife in him, because honestly, why would she trust him?
He did rescue her from a bunch of brigands who were trying to kill her.
Yeah, but she has no idea who he is. He might have rescued her so that way he could have sport. She doesn't know.
How many people does he have with him at this point? Because he doesn't have his whole army with him. It's just
Aram, Furin, Terrell, and Faile. So it's a party of 5. So, but 5 very well-equipped and well-horsed people. So,
are there any of the Ashaman with him?
No, I think they all stay back.
Magden, a good 10 years older than Perrin. Yeah, she has a daughter Perrin's age.
That's the slowing.
Yeah, that's the slowing.
Mm-hmm.
She's quite a bit older than that. She is not 30.
No.
She's 40.
Yeah, she's in her 40s.
In her 40s.
I mean, she would have had kids fairly young because she's a queen, but still. Like, she needed to be a little bit more than 10. And she looks exactly like Elaine in the very first description. Like, in his head, he's looking at her, describing her as he would describe Elaine. And then she's like, oh, she even reminds me of Elaine. Huh, well, that's odd.
Elaine, yeah.
And it's like,
happens to be her mother. Yeah.
Perrin.
Mm-hmm. So he invites them back to the camp.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, Morgase is like, we must go on, Linny. And Linny's like, what are you thinking? Yeah.
And Perrin's like, this Talonvor guy seems a little bit like a Chad. And it turns out he is. For once, Perrin's reading people correctly. Yeah, it's hilarious seeing this group that you know so well through eyes you know so well. Like, these arcs have never crossed, and suddenly they're in the same space. It's really fun.
And I like that about, it's like describing things from a different POV. It's like rediscovering something for the first time, re-seeing all these characters for the first time.
Totally. And then I love this line from Terrell, best to hear both sides, whatever you thought you saw. It's like, it's true. It's really true. No matter what you thought you saw, you should probably try to fact check yourself, if at all possible.
The number of times I've seen a video online and made a conclusion, and then I've seen the extended version of the video, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I was wrong. And then I've seen the extended version of that video, and I was like, oh no, I was right in the beginning. And then he keeps like, it's amazing how much context matters.
Yeah, yeah. It's context and perspective are things that you should think about.
Mm-hmm. And relative power levels. That's something that's really important. I think that we don't talk about when an interaction happens between two people. Often those two people aren't on the same level of power. Whether it's an interaction at work, whether it's a police civilian interaction, whether it's a teacher-student interaction, whether it's a customer service employee interaction, right? At no point in any of those interactions are those two people on the same power level.
Yeah.
And if you treat them like they are, you're not going to understand the dynamics of what's going on. You're not going to, what looks like a friendly conversation is actually someone in fear of their life.
Yeah, that part.
Yeah.
That part. One person is acting out of survival, and one person is acting out of innocence or ignorance in a best case scenario. Supposed ignorance, supposed innocence, supposed ignorance. And one person is trying to survive.
Yeah, no, there's not always a balance there when there's a power imbalance, even though it might look that way externally. Or sometimes when it looks like there's a power imbalance in the other direction. And it's like, no, that's actually an equal situation.
Yeah, context. I also want to point out here that Perrin is a total fucking hypocrite here, because he's like, Perrin was surprised. He had thought Terrell could not think beyond the end of his sword. It's like, Perrin, you spend half your inner narrative thinking about how people think you're slow, even though you're not. Like, could you maybe extend the courtesy of not doing that to others? Please. Possibly.
I think that's more just he's so deferred to his Aes Sedai and does whatever he's told that he's never, like, expressed an opinion before. So Perrin's just like, whoa, that was out of the blue. I didn't think you could think, because he's never actually said anything before. Because he's not one of the new guys. He's one of the Aes Sedai's warders who's been around for a while. And been on the journey for at least a week, right?
Okay, yeah. Maybe it's an Aes Sedai thing rather than a violence thing. Maybe. And then he sees all the holes in their story. Like, they've got this story, and he's just like, none of your smells make sense with your story at all.
I wonder why he doesn't really follow up on that. I mean, he can tell he's being lied to, but
I think it's because he doesn't sense a threat in it, and he figures people have a right to their secrets if it's not a threat to him. And we have Seonda getting a scarf stuffed in her mouth. Always a fun moment of comedy.
Why was she just not shutting up about wanting to what? Something? Yeah.
About something to do with the situation. She wouldn't shut up, and the wise ones were like...
Probably being sent into the city to talk to Alejandra or something like that.
I don't know, because we don't hear her talking in the background at all. Like, we have no idea, but she disobeyed the wise ones by continuing to talk, so they made her stop talking.
So, there's this one guy who was the last one to run, and he was not very cowed. And it turns out that is Hari, right? So he's like, the stubble-cheeked man stopped gaping at Synod and licked his lips. That's Hari's work, looking at a bunch of ears that have been cut off of victims.
This is Hari?
This is Hari.
I always wondered if this fucker was the one that actually took the trophies after all.
Yeah, no, this is Hari.
Okay,
and we catch up to him later, and he's the one who, like, he's with the prophet, and he's like, Perrin, he's the one who, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, I never caught that. I never put that all back together. Oh.
And then, and the prophet Masema goes, oh, Harry, what are you, blah, blah, blah. So, it turns to him and goes, you're Harry, and turns out that's the guy that Perrin let go in the first place.
I never noticed that connection.
Yep. He's a mean one. So this guy that's Harry's work. Harry's a mean one. He likes to take trophies. He's talking about himself.
Gotcha. Yeah. This guy's a fucker.
He's basically admitting his guilt. He reminds me a lot of
Adnan Kadir. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, this stubble-cheeked, rumpled sadist of a weasel. Don't like those guys. I don't like them.
So, because might have dropped is not had dropped, right? He didn't actually see him drop it, so he could have just run over where it was dropped. So, he doesn't have proof that this is the guy who committed the murders, which, I mean, fine.
Justice,
thin,
whatever.
Right, whatever.
Fucking paladin.
He clearly would have killed Magnan and group, so I think he would have been justified, but he lets him go.
Yep.
And sends a message. He's so angry that he sends a message to Masema.
It's a good fucking message.
I'm Perrin, and your precious Lord Dragon sent me here. You spread the word. He sent me, and if I find a man with trophies, he hangs. If I find a man burning a farm, he hangs. If one of you looks at me cross-eyed, he hangs. And you can tell Masema I said so, too.
Get it.
Love that. Yeah.
You just tear him up one side and down the other. Yes.
And that's the thing. He's like, if you look at me cross-eyed, he hangs. And here's this guy. Harry should have just been hanged. I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, it's this. Oh, yeah. If he looks at me cross-eyed, he hangs. So good. Yeah. Terrible person.
Yeah. Which, of course, totally violates his plan, right? Because his plan was
he just changed it in a heartbeat. Slow, deliberate
like,
thinking, my ass.
Right. Certainly decisive. But he justifies it in after messing it up, which is basically like, I need him to stop doing these atrocities. I can't wait until I get to him to stop the atrocities. I'm not going to wait to stop the atrocities. And if that means I need to send him a message that I'm on my way, and if he prepares for me, well, he's not technically my enemy.
That's some backfilling. That's not what you were thinking.
Can I just say, though, Perrin does do Masema a little bit dirty, right? Like, he does kind of put him on the front lines without proper support and just lets him and his followers get slaughtered.
Well, you were just saying these guys should have been killed. It's
well,
just
this
that logic
guy,
extended to his whole fiendish cult army.
Yeah, it becomes really problematic when you think about, like, what if Perrin, instead of putting him on the front lines, had just, I don't know, marched them into a chamber and killed them? That seems worse.
That does
seems
seem
bad.
much worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a way for them to do what they want and harm his enemies while doing it. It's a really brutal, cold, dirty decision, but Masema is insane, manipulated by the shadow, and leading a cult. Like, you have to put a stop to that somehow.
But it's not like there's any time pressure because it's the last battle or anything like that.
No.
They can no.
They totally have time to, like, peacefully decondition them, and, and they're all committing war crimes.
Right.
They're all aiding and abetting in war crimes at the very least. Like,
but yet he brings the White Cloaks into the fold.
Which I have really complicated feelings about. Granted, it's a remnant of the White Cloaks. And they're the ones who were willing to stick with Ghealdan through at least 2, like, crucible moments. So if there were any White Cloaks to redeem, those are them. But I still you're part of a really horrible institution and you didn't stop it or leave. And I'm not super happy with Perrin for picking them up, honestly. So, yeah, I'm internally consistent on this one thing.
I like the idea of redeeming the troops. That it's the leadership that needs to be done away with.
I like that in principle, but some institutions are just rotten to the core. I don't have the answers. I just have opinions.
So after Perrin goes on this massive rant, threatens the life of the prophet, declares himself aide to the Dragon Reborn, and decides he's going to do what he wants with a queen, Magdan is like, maybe I will stick around. Maybe there is a little bit of power here. It's so funny that all Morgase has done since she has left is look for a source of power and tried to stick to it.
That's her MO.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and here she's found it.
She has a very hard time letting go of who she was. She says she's let go, but she hasn't. Learning to serve tea is a very good meditation for her to learn how to let go of this. But yeah, she's like, you might be an ally or a danger. I need to attach myself to you. I'll figure out what to do with that later. I just need to suckerfish on.
It's a lot like Faine in that way. Yeah.
Honestly, she's kind of like a good Faine, except that she doesn't have, like, corresponding magic powers. But yeah, she wants to be an advisor. She can't be a leader.
Mm-hmm. She wants to touch power, even if she can't have it herself.
She feels an obligation to do it, which is, I have issues with that.
She defends Elaine, she defends Andor, she is who she is, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also this whole exchange gets Faile all kinds of a flutter. Like, oh, he's so masterful. She likes seeing him threaten to hang people. And then he's like, yeah, Faile's the best. And it's just like, you two are such a dynamo of potential energy. It's terrifying. Not that it's a bad thing. It's a lot. They're just both a lot. They're going to be great monarchs of Saldaea.
I can imagine that. So they accept an offer to stay for a day or two, which turns out in the next chapter, Faile basically hires them on. And that ends with a bit of a cliffhanger. It's almost an abrupt, like, okay, this chapter's getting too long. I've got to find an ending place and cut it in the middle. This does feel like one chapter cut.
Yeah.
Kind of in half.
Yeah, agreed.
Where he says, but he ended on this cliffhanger of he just recognized two of the people in the group. And we know it's just Gil and
right. Which,
Ryan
like,
Quinn.
even when you're reading this the first time, you know who that is. It's
know.
not really
Right.
a cliffhanger at all.
You might have to think about it and be like, wait, he does? And then you're like, oh, right, he stayed in his inn. Of course he knows. Like, it's one of those things where, like, I'm so happy that Jordan didn't ignore the fact that he would have known these people.
Right, and then it makes it like when there's the thing with Eludra where Tom meets Eludra twice, and it's like a separate incident each time, and that's not an authorial flaw. He did that on purpose. Like, you can tell because he includes that conversation here.
And there's that whole conversation with Matt and Tom where Tom
and
says,
he even explains it.
Yeah, women are, friends or lovers, and what about Eludra, who is neither a friend nor a lover? What would you call her, And
yeah, it's like enemies, friends.
Enemies, friends, lovers, or something like that. Yeah.
I forget how it goes, but yeah, he does address that specifically. So yeah, it is nice that Jordan's like, yes, I made a bazillion characters. I can occasionally loop them back around and have that be a meaningful connection back to book one. It's a little bit of something that you as a first-time reader can recognize. Yay!
And then there's Bail Domon, who's just like, I don't know what to do this scene. Let me sprinkle a little Bail Domon on it.
Do ex machina, Bail Domon.
Yeah, do it.
Doobie do ex machina.
I guess I can read that last paragraph. As you say, Mistress Magdon, he said slowly, masking his surprise was difficult, especially since he had just recognized the two men trying to keep their horses between him and them. Taviran worked to bring them here, a strange twist in any case. It might be just the thing at that. I gotta say, so the trailer just dropped for the TV show, and there is a burning in there, and it was brutal. Like, and so we roll past that kind of stuff in these sort of descriptions about, oh, there were burnings of people at the stake on Almoth Plain, and it's like, oh yeah, whatever. But you show that in a show, and it is awful and brutal and sticks in my head and really, really hard to watch. And so there's a certain level of choice they get to make with the TV show, but how much of that they want to emphasize, because it's there. There's some real brutality outside of the Dark One.
Yeah, the crimes of humanity. Crimes against humanity by humanity they're there. They're really there. There's a lot of very specific historical instances that have stuck in my head for a very long time because of learning about them. And then I see them in these books, and it's just a lot. And now I'm seeing them in the show, and I'm like, that's a lot. Also, thank you.
Yeah.
Though I do have to share. So I want my mom to get into the show. I don't think she will because it's just probably not her cup of tea, but she really wants to try it out. But she absolutely cannot ever deal with the imagery of people being on fire. It's an absolute hard limit no with her. She cannot deal with it. But I really wanted to show her the trailer. And this shot is in it. And I'm like, she will literally hate me for like ever if I show this to her because it will stick in her head and it's not okay. But because of all my podcasting skills, I was able to copy the file and cut out that part, keep the audio so that way the music and the voiceover was all smooth, but just have it go black, which like there's multiple black spots in the trailer, and just have that scene just not be there. it just wasn't there. And I played it for her, and it was choppy because my software still won't export with sound. So I had to play it in the editing software. So it was like just the preview view, and it was kind of choppy. She didn't notice, and I was like, oh, all the details are so lost. But she loved it and didn't even notice the gap. And so I was able to show her that and get her all hyped for the trailer, because I have just enough technical skills to be like, I don't like that scene. Excise. Like, sorry to the show, but my mom can't deal. So
So what are you going to do when that pops up in the show?
I'll just tell her not to watch the episode.
Okay.
Probably. She'll just be like, this isn't the episode with the thing you don't want, and so I will synopsize the important plot points for you, and we can move on. I'll just have to watch everything ahead of her, basically, if she actually gets into it beyond the first episode, which I really don't think she will.
I sent the trailer to my parents, and they sounded very interested. My dad, in particular, I think, was interested. He saw the effects and was like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. And I told them that and I had already agreed to spend Christmas with them, right? Before we found out that the final episode was dropping on Christmas Eve. So I messaged them, I was like, just so you know.
That's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing on Christmas Eve. We are watching this episode. So they agreed to that.
Nice.
So,
yeah, my dad is an absolute violence phobe and has gotten more so over the years. So he will not be watching the trailers, much less the show. But my in-laws, I'm pretty sure my mother-in-law has been interested since the very first bit of the news started coming out, because she's just into TV and enjoying her retirement, and was like, epic fantasy that my daughter-in-law's interested in? Yes, I'm in. So, and she's into like, true crime and murder mystery and horror stuff. So like, she'll be fine. So I'm probably going to be spending Christmas with them. So I might actually get to watch it like with my mother-in-law, and that will be fun.
I'm amazed how many people I've heard who are like, yeah, I mean, I'm super interested. I would never read the books, but I'm super interested in the TV show, right? Like, I'm not going to invest the time to read the books. They say that now. And then after season 1 ends, they have to find out, wait, what? Wait, hold on. Get the books out and read them.
Yeah, my stepmom is currently holding Prodigal Summer over my head in bargain for reading Eye of the World. She's like, you have to read Prodigal Summer, and then I'll read Eye of the World. I'm reading my way through Eye of the World. I got past chapter 4. Where are you at in Prodigal Summer? And I'm like, I still don't have it. She's like, well, I read another half page before I fell asleep. She's going very slow. She's trying.
I can't do that. If I read that slow, I'll drop a book.
I know.
Because I'll lose the thread.
It's been years since she's been trying to read it. Oh, well. We'll just keep hammering at them.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?